Welcome to the Charter Oak Chess Club's YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be going over a game played by former world champion Tigran Petrosian, who is best known for his defensive style of play. However, in this game, Tigran Petrosian goes for an amazing attack by using an early pawn storm. Enjoy. So Petrosian has the white pieces and Kuzali has the black pieces in this game. And Tigran Petrosian starts off with pawn to d4, knight to f6, pawn to c4, pawn to e6, knight to c3, and then we transpose into a queen's gambit declined with pawn to d5. And Petrosian goes for my favorite line, which is the exchange variation. We have take, take, and now bishop to g5. We're going to pin that knight, and we're getting that bishop out of the way before we play e3, because we don't want our bishop to be blocked in by our own pawns. And now knight b to d7, and pause the video and figure out what would you play here as white. So if you study your tactics, you might say, wait a minute, this knight is pinned to the queen, it can't move, so I should be able to grab this free pawn on d5. But unfortunately, this is a trap, so even though it looks like we're winning a pawn, black is just going to say, it's okay, I'm going to take that knight, you can take my queen, and now white's going to realize their mistake after bishop to b4 check. And with no knight and the bishop being on d8 now, white only has one way to defend their king. They have to play queen to d2, and after another check, if we count the material correctly, white has an extra pawn, but black has an extra knight, and they'll go on to win this game. So this is known as the elephant trap, so don't fall for this when you're playing against the queen's gambit declined. Now, of course, Tigran Petrosian is a world champion. He's not going to fall for a little trap like that, so he simply plays pawn to e3, and the game continues. Bishop comes out, bishop goes to d3, castle kingside, and knight g to e2. And I like the little intricacies of the exchange variation. So we're going to go back here all the way to the beginning and say, what if we didn't go for exchange? What if we played something like pawn to e3? Well, if we play pawn to e3, this is totally fine. But the problem is this pawn can be captured. So when we move our light squared bishop, we're going to waste the tempo. So let's see what that looks like. So bishop comes out, knight goes to f3, castle. Okay, it's time to move our light squared bishop so that we can castle, right? Our dark squared bishop is still locked in under pawns. That's not so great, but we'll work on it. But if I want to move my bishop either to e2 or d3, black can now capture and force us to move again. So we waste the tempo, and we still have the castle. And then black can play pawn to c5, and the game can continue. So our bishop is blocked in. We kind of waste the tempo here, and the knight's in a normal developing square. But now let's go back to the game, and let's see what's different in that structure. So after knight g to e2, we realize a few things. One, when we played bishop to d3, we don't have to worry about this pawn taking on c4 because we got rid of that c4 pawn. Also, our dark square bishop is out of the pawn chain, so if we whether we want to trade it off or hold on to the bishop, at least it's active. And knight g to e2 is the last one. It's kind of a strange move. And because we don't have the pawn on c4, we still want to attack the center a lot and get a big pawn storm going. So we're going to play pawn to f3 and then pawn to e4 later in the game. And even if you don't know this opening, you should be able to figure all that out by saying, wait, why didn't they just play knight to f3? That's a more natural move. All right, so rook to e8, grabbing the center, queen to c2, pawn to c6, pawn to h3, which is just to give an escape square for his bishop, so they like their dark squared bishop here. And now knight to e4, attacking the bishop. They're going to save their bishop. And now knight to f6. And if we're looking here, let's count how many attackers we have on that e4 knight. 1, 2, 3. Defenders are 1, 2. So can I take this? Well, let's see what happens. After capture, and then capture, and then capture, and then capture, it looks like we're going to win a pawn in some of these lines. But the problem is this square was also defended by the rook. So after bishop to b4 check, again, that same tricky move, we see how this e4 square was, in fact, defended. So all the way over here, it is why it's important to either know your openings or just really look into it tactically and realize it looks like there's 2 defenders, there's actually 3. So instead, white goes on with their normal plan. They play pawn to f3, and we're going to kick that knight out of the way. Capture, capture back with the pawn, and now it's on a queen's gambit. It's really a London system. Look, we got this little triangle going on. We got the good bishop on the light squares. We have the bad bishop already outside the pawn chain. And it's just a London system, essentially. So black plays bishop to d6, and this is actually the mistake in the game. It doesn't look like a mistake. It looks like we're just trying to trade down, get a normal position. But it would have been better just to play something like bishop d7, How do you fight along the system? Pawn to c5 would have been the best move. Maybe even g6. Just little moves like that would have made a huge difference in this game. So bishop to d6, the problem with this is after capture, seems like black's doing fine, but now white is forced to play pawn to e4, because one, their pawn's getting attacked, and two, even if it wasn't getting attacked, pawn to e4 just makes a lot of sense. This is something you always want to do, e4, e5, and go after center. If black attacks, we'll just capture with that f-pawn, and even though it looks like this is weak for white on the king side, the knight's doing a great job guarding those squares. So the knight goes out of the way because black doesn't want this fork to happen, so they move the knight away. And then pawn to e5, which does two things. It attacks the queen. It also traps the knight, which can no longer move in this game. And now the bishop and queen are going after this h7 pawn with check. So black finds queen to h6, which saves the knight, because if I play pawn to g4 now, the knight goes to f4. It also defends against this h7 threat. And pause the video, what would you play here as white? So Petrosian plays a very interesting move. He just plays queen to d2. And with a lot of these games that we've looked at recently from this book, it seems like these grandmasters know exactly when to say, let's stop with this middle game and go to an endgame. So capture, and everything is better for white, slightly better, right? This pawn has passed the halfway mark, right? Black doesn't have a pawn that's past the halfway mark. The pieces are developed and the rooks are connected, right? Black still has to connect their rooks. And also we get tempo. We get to throw another pawn to attack the knight. And so black has to play pawn to g6 so that when we attack with the knight can run back to g7. And now look at all the pawns that we have just rolling in this game. The rooks are connected. We're ready to play some chess here. Pawn to h4. Black plays pawn to h6. White has an advantage here, but it's very easy to throw it away. It's very easy to play something like pawn to h5. Pawn to g5, and suddenly it's like, wow, this is a very locked structure. How am I actually going to get an advantage out of this? And same thing with if pawn to g5, they can play pawn to h5. So white brings a rook to f1. They want to move this f-pawn. Bishop moves out of the way. Let's connect those rooks. Rook to g1, because when you move this pawn, you need something to guard the g-pawn. And black tries to throw some pawns as well. And now with f5, the threat is very easy. Two attackers, one defender, what to do. So we have to capture back with pawn, of course, because look at that pin. And now f6 is going to be played. You can't stop it with the pawn because they'll take with their pawn. So we got to move the king away. And now Petrosian finds another great move here. Pawn to e6, just crashing in the center. And the idea is if you play something like pawn to f6, again, maybe this knight hops over here or even over here, and it's hard, well, not there, but maybe knight to e6, and they kind of sort of hold on to this game a little bit longer, because how are we going to infiltrate? We can't go to g7, the knight's there, maybe they slide the rooks over. It's just going to be harder to play here, so we don't want that at all. So instead, pawn to e6, and this actually loses a pawn temporarily, so black has to capture. And now the pawn push to f6 forces the knight to move away or it will be captured. And now try to figure out how you would finish off this game. So Petrosian finds bishop takes knight, pawn takes back, and now the beautiful move, rook to g7, and black resigned. And just look how this king is completely trapped in the corner and is defended by the pawn. And we're putting pressure on this bishop, which is undefended. So if black decides, I'm going to try to defend my bishop, something like either moving the bishop away or playing rook to d8, we're not going to go use both our rooks like a ladder mate, because there's an easier way to do this. We just take the knight and go knight to f4, and we're threatening to play knight to g6 checkmate, and black has no good way to stop that. They can postpone it by playing a few checks like rook to e2, and then we just capture with the king, but there's no way to stop that checkmate. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to get new chess content every week. Have you played a great game of chess recently? Feel free to email it to us and we'll go through it during our next video.